但係依家仍然有好多政府都係參加北京冬奧啦，即係你點睇咧？
其實好彩的確係有好多政府啦，或者唔同嘅國家仍然係會參加一個冬奧啦。咁但係其實我覺得我哋係即係其實係 achieve 緊一啲嘅 breakthrough 嘅一啲突破。尤其是其實我哋睇翻歷史咧，其實1980年就係一個北京即係我莫斯科個奧運係有唔同嘅杯葛嘅。咁其實之後其實大概10年之後，我哋都係見證住一個蘇聯嘅解體啦。咁我相信可能。
但係你覺得呢一啲集會，北京係會唔會理會你哋個訴求？
嗱，當然啦，北京唔會因為單一個係一個倫敦嘅集會就會跪低啦，呢個絕對係冇可能嘅事。但係其實我哋講緊係全世界同嘅人，我哋而家喺一個即係紐約啊，喺 DC 啊，喺倫敦啊，喺唔同地方，我哋都係有呢一個咁嘅集會。咁其實我相信全世界係俾一個非常之大嘅壓力去集資。我哋今日係有唔同嘅國會議員，包括上下議院嘅法案議員係會參加呢個集會。所以其實我係相信一個滾雪球嘅效應啦，即係藉住我哋搞緊唔同。呢個就係我哋應該做。
嗱，你覺得其他國家仲譬如英國政府仲可以做啲咩去幫香港人？
英國政府其實可以做嘅係非常之多嘅，尤其是其實即係英國政府作為一個中美嘅成員嘅宣傳部之一啦。其實暫時嚟講，我哋都仲未見到有任何嘅一啲嘅制裁係關於香港嘅。所以其實我覺得下一步要推進嘅咧，就係一定要係令到呢一個即係方式嘅傳佢係會係就住一個中美嘅實際嘅行動啦，例如啲制裁，呢個係我哋希望可以。
我要重新進一次嗎
？OK， 好，唔該晒你。
Here's London Piccadilly Circus.
That the IOC has awarded China again these games, and it's just that the IOC is too much, and they do not give a damn about the principles. Look at right now what they're facing. They're told not to speak out, otherwise they're responsible Coca-Cola, companies that were going to that they use for advertising. They're doing it on their own time. They're not advertising out. They're doing it on their time because they know it's bad. And then a party.
吵啊！你那边回声太大了。
This is my daughter. This is Dilmas, an inspiring figure. Inspiring individual.
我怎么样把手机顺着从哪拉着？有的时候会一直在晃。 在前面。对。When are they gonna finish? Oh, when are they gonna start?
就是这样就可以。
Okay.
OK 吗？
没有啊，还没有。
Is this okay, or should we go back, or? It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you. OK 没？
I'll take this one. Take this one.
可以吗？啊， 可以吗？ Hello Ben, can you tell me why you come here today?
Yeah, I'm here today because I think it is outrageous that a regime that is credibly accused of genocide, of dismantling Hong Kong's freedoms and autonomy, carrying out forced organ harvesting, persecution of Falun Gong practitioners and Christians, and an all-out crackdown on human rights and continued repression in Tibet. Such a regime should not be holding the Winter Olympics, and I think it's absolutely right that as many people as possible protest as loudly as possible against these genocide games.
Yeah. Do you think the UK government do enough to pass the Beijing government?
No, I think the UK government should do a lot more. I welcome the fact that the UK government has imposed a diplomatic boycott, as have some other governments, but we need to do a lot more to sanction this regime and pursue justice.
Yeah, still a lot of government participate in the Beijing Olympic Games. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they should be ashamed of themselves. I think more governments should boycott the games. I never called for a sporting boycott because that's a matter for the athletes, but I think for the governments, they shouldn't be attending.
But do you think the boycott is useful?
I think it's definitely useful in terms of sending a clear message to the regime in Beijing that it can't be business as usual.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
You're on camera.
Testing.
Hello.
係 hello 大家好，我哋搞 testing too much echo testing 我哋開始，我哋係會播我哋幾首唔同嘅國歌先啦。咁我希望大家喺播國歌嘅時候，即係唔同嘅國歌嘅時候，大家可以保持去肅靜，我哋尊重翻其他族群嘅國歌。First, we will try to play the national anthem of Hong Kong. Glory to Hong Kong. 光復香港！光復香港！ And now we will play the national anthem for the Uyghurs. Free East Turkestan! Free East Turkestan! And now we are going to play the anthem for the Tigray group. Pretty great. Pretty great. And lastly, we have the Tibetan song, anthem.
Down, CCP! Down, CCP!
Testing. It's delighting to see the crowd here today to support the alternative Olympics opening ceremony. And 6 months ago, it is the first time that different Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, and Tibetan community coming together to tackle the China issues. And for the last few months, we have participating in different events, like conference, we even try to host different rallies like this one. And 1 month ago, the UK government announced that there has been effectively a diplomatic boycotting of the Beijing Olympics. And today we are going to celebrate this milestone, and we hope to push the UK government to do much more. Recently, I've watched a movie which is called The Edge of War, and there is a I would say meaningful line. That is that we can't choose the times we live in, but the only choice we have is how we respond. So we respond in solidarity, in determination, and action in response to the Chinese Communist Party oppression and genocide in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Hong Kong. So we are going to pressure the UK government and the other democracies to do much more. We will do much more, and we will free our homeland someday. Thank you. And the first thing that we will do is that we will have a joint statement from different communities, like the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, and Tibet. So our UK representative for the World Uyghur Congress, Rahima Mahmut, will try to read this joint statement.
Thank you very much, dear friends. Very happy to see such large crowd, and happy to see many familiar faces and also new faces. In a few hours, the Chinese government will be hosting athletes, diplomats, politicians, and media for their opening celebrations. But beyond the walls of the Beijing National Stadium, our fellow Tibetans, Uyghurs, and Hong Kongers are in turmoil. We are stood here tonight in exile. If we returned home, we would likely be arrested, detained, or taken to concentration camps. Many of us are unable to speak to family and friends. It is an insult to the sacrifices we have been forced to make that China has once again been given the honor of hosting the Olympic Games. All of us have made tough decisions advocating for your people when the Chinese regime is your oppressor is not easy. But we recognize our responsibility to speak out, even when it came at a cost. The IOC broadcasters, state representatives, and athletes, they also faced dilemmas too. But we are here tonight because at each turn they made the weak choice. But they will not feel the worst consequences of those poor decisions. Instead, it is our people that will bear the brunt and yet another propaganda victory for the CCP. We know this because we have been here before. Tibetans remember when Beijing hosted the Games in 2008. They also remember the arrests, repression, and mass detention that followed any dissent. Whilst some said that Olympics would improve the Chinese government's human rights record, Tibetans continued life in an open-air prison, their cultural rights are trampled. Tibetan children are taken to state-run boarding schools, where they are severed from their identity and are forced to forget their native tongue. The speed at which Hong Kong's democracy has been destroyed has alarmed us all. Hong Kongers were living in a relative freedom just a few years ago. Yet, in those few years, their country has become almost unrecognizable. So many of the things that Hong Kongers held dear, the free press, the right to voice opposition, democracy, have been torn away. And now every prominent democracy activist is either in exile or in jail. Uyghurs are facing a genocide in our own homeland. Our people live under constant surveillance. Our women are forcefully sterilized. Their babies forcefully aborted. Millions are detained in concentration camps where they face torture, systematic rape, even organ harvesting. As a people, we are traumatized. The Chinese government is doing unspeakable things to our community, whilst much of the world looks on and does nothing. This is not just about Beijing. This is about every institution and individual that has put power and profit over human life. Sponsors, broadcasters, and of course, the IOC and Thomas Bach. To them, this is a game of money and influence, and we should all be repulsed. But we should also be proud of the unity and the resilience we have built over the past year. Our unified resistance will long outcast these games. In a struggle that can at times feel fruitless, we have picked up some wins along the way. Diplomatic boycotts from the multiple countries and widespread media coverage of CCP's atrocities. It is thanks to our movement that these Olympic Games will be memorialized as the Genocide Games. Thank you very much for attending this alternative Olympic ceremony. Thank you. Free Uyghurs! Free Uyghurs! Free Uyghurs! Free Uyghurs! Free Uyghurs! Free Uyghurs! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Hong Kong! 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 Thank you.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much for being here on the eve of the Genocide Games. We are now have some special guests and MPs here with us tonight. And before we bring them to the stage, it would be possible if everyone could come to the crowd. We could make your way down. The MPs will be coming here. Can everyone make their way, give a little space for our next guest speakers? Thank you again for being here tonight on the eve of the Genocide Games. Today we have special guests and MPs, members of Parliament who are here, and it's an absolute honour for them to be here today. We really appreciate these MPs over the last year have been campaigning alongside Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, and all those people oppressed under China's rule. Many of them, some of them have been sanctioned by China for speaking up truth. So thank you to our MPs. Thank you for standing up for truth and the right side of history. I would like to now introduce our Labour MP, Afzal Khan, from Manchester, Gorton. He has consistently spoke out against Islamophobia, both in the UK and abroad, particularly in his support for the Uyghurs. He has also advocated for the rights of Tibetans and Hong Kongers and other persecuted minorities in China. Unfortunately, Afzal Khan has not yet arrived, so I would like to invite Edward Lucas, who is a journalist, parliamentary candidate and non-resident senior fellow at the Centre for European Policy and Analysis. He has written extensively on Russian and Chinese influence on Western politics. He is here this evening to represent the Liberal Democrats. Thank you for taking the opportunity to be with us here today.
Good evening, everyone. Free Hong Kong.
Free Hong Kong!
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet!
Free Turkestan.
Free Turkestan!
No genocide Olympics.
No genocide Olympics!
Good, we want it louder next time. I'm not an MP yet, but I hope to be one for the cities of London and Westminster, which is right here. And one of my constituents is the Chinese embassy. I want them to hear us up there in Portland Place. And I want to say a special welcome to the people from the Chinese Embassy, from the Ministry of State Security and the United Front Work Department, who must be here somewhere in the crowd. I want to say all together, good evening, comrades.
Good evening, comrades.
Good evening, comrades. You're going to learn something very important here. You're going to learn about democracy. Because what we're doing here is not allowed in Lhasa, it's not allowed in Kashgar, it's not allowed in Urumqi, and it's certainly not allowed in Beijing. It's called democracy. It's the right of people to get together and to make their feelings known in the expectation that you're not going to be carted off to a mind control camp at the end of the evening, but your MPs and your elected representatives are going to listen. That's what we've got here in London, in Britain, in Europe, in America, in the free world, and it's what we don't have in China, in Russia, in Ethiopia, and the other places where democracy has given way to dictatorship. So thank you all very much indeed for listening to me. Please help us. All the politicians here, we're cross-party. We need your support. The more fuss you make, the more pressure we can put on this government and on other governments around the world. Together, we can show the Chinese Communist Party that they don't speak for China, they only speak for their own brutal, kleptocratic, racist instincts. So one more time, thank you, comrades, and free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Turkestan!
Free Turkestan!
No genocide Olympics!
No genocide Olympics!
Thank you.
Free Tigray! Free Tigray! Free Tigray!
Free Tibet!
Stop the genocide in Tigray!
Stop the genocide in Tibet!
Stop the genocide in Tigray!
Stop the genocide in Tibet!
Thank you. Thank you, Edward Lucas, for being here and speaking out so passionately. We now have Afzal Khan here, the Labour MP from Manchester, who has consistently spoken out against Islamophobia here and there and different places. Also for Tibet, East Turkestan, and human rights in China. And we'd like to welcome you and thank you for your for being here.
Thank you, friends. Thank you. It's good to be here with you. It's nice to see so many of you here. And the message you already heard. The message is simple. Free Tibet. Free East Turkestan. And free Hong Kongers. We can see that they're talking about the Olympic Winters in China. It's all about peace. It's all about making sure we have those games in peace. How can you have those when there is genocide taking place? And that's why it's so important that all of us to be here. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all the parliamentarians from across the parties. They're all here to support you. And we want to see our government here to take stronger action against those people who have been committing these genocide, those who have been persecuting these people. And I want to thank those ministers who have declined not to be there. They need to stand in solidarity with us. So well done to all of you. We will keep up this fight till everybody's free there. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lord Alton from Liverpool. He's a crossbencher in the House of Lords. He has been vocal at a critique of the Chinese Communist Party and firmly lent his support for pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. Lord Alton was sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party last year after tabling the genocide amendment in support of Uyghurs. Thank you for being here.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, but especially you've managed not just to unite people from different political parties, but Manchester and Liverpool. And Liverpool, of course, is the centre of the universe. And it's a great pleasure to be with Asphalt, but also with Ed and with my great friend Nusrat Ghani, who's going to speak to you next. And as you've just been told, I mean, Nuz and I have a badge of honour. We have a badge of honour in that we have been sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party who want to silence us. And the fact that we're gathered here at Piccadilly Circus makes it clear we're not going to be silenced by anyone. I've just come straight from Parliament where we've had a debate this afternoon about the growth of authoritarian regimes. And on our minds and in our hearts, of course, are all the threats of bullying and the things that have been done by the CCP. I've got just three things I want to say to you this evening. The first is about the Olympic spirit. The second is about the malign oppression of the CCP. And the third is about why we, all of us, who have these privileges and liberties, must be a light in a dark world. The Olympic spirit, friends. The Olympic flame which inaugurates the Olympic Games has its origins in ancient Greece, where a sacred fire was kept burning throughout the Games. Greece, too, was the cradle, of course, of democracy. Keep those two thoughts in mind in considering the appalling degradation of the Olympic spirit and the ideals of democracy by staging the Olympic Games in Beijing, a state which is responsible for genocide, even according to our Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Elizabeth Truss. Genocide is the crime above all crimes. There will be no place at the Olympic Games for the Uyghurs. There will be no Olympic fire burning for the Uyghurs, nor for the people of Tibet. There will be no light of the Olympic flame. Not for Hong Kong, the light of the Olympic flame. Not for Taiwan, the light of the Olympic flame. Not for Falun Gong, or religious believers, dissenters, lawyers, journalists, the light of the Olympic flame. Not since 1936, when the Nazi Games were held in Berlin, when the world saw Hitler use the Olympics to promote his hideous ideology, with most Jewish German athletes barred from taking part in the Olympic ideals. Not since then have we seen the Games so debased. And to those companies who have sponsored these Beijing Olympics, we should say, shame on you. Shame on you. Secondly, let me emphasize the malign nature of the CCP. I was one of the international team which monitored the last free elections in the wonderful city of Hong Kong. Since then, we've seen the CCP snuff out the flame of freedom, incarcerating and intimidating anyone who dares to challenge their hegemony. We've seen the rule of law subverted, and we've seen the sham of kangaroo courts subverting justice, and we've seen British judges willing to give kangaroo courts and a corrupted system the veneer of respectability. Shame on those judges! Shame on those judges! Or take Xinjiang. where the independent Uyghur Tribunal has shone a light on genocide and crimes against humanity. And I pay great tribute to Sir Geoffrey Nice QC, who chaired that tribunal. Take Tibet, where I visited, and where there is a culture and people who've been driven to the edge of extinction. Shame on the CCP for doing that. Take brave, brave individuals like Shan Zheng, who is incarcerated for questioning the origins of COVID-19 in Wuhan. Its malign oppression of its own people is reflected in the subversion of the United Nations and its institutions, and indeed in the infiltration of our own British universities and even our British Parliament. Shame on them! My third and final point concerns you and me, what we must do. I began talking about the Olympic flame. With our privileges, with our freedoms and liberties, we must keep alight the flame of freedom and keep alive people's hope. When everything else was taken out of Pandora's box, the one thing that remained was hope. It's why we were right to create in this country the BNO scheme. But we must extend that to young people, to the young people who have been excluded by the current BNO scheme. And I'm glad to be able to tell you that next week, with my friends Chris Patten, the former governor of Hong Kong and a Conservative peer, and Charlie Faulkner, the former Lord Chancellor and Labour peer, we have an amendment that I've tabled to extend that scheme under our new Nationality and Borders Bill to young BNO holders, people born after 1997 as the children of people who are BNO holders. It's also why we must impose sanctions on those responsible for the crimes which I have described, whether it's in Xinjiang or in Hong Kong. And top of my list would be Carrie Lam, sanction Carrie Lam. And finally, it's why we must never forget the CCP's atrocities, from the Cultural Revolution to Tiananmen Square, from Tibet to Taiwan, from Wuhan to Hong Kong. They can dismantle monuments in Hong Kong, but they can't dismantle our memories. They can subjugate people, but not their spirit. Liu Xiaobao said that freedom of expression is the fundamental freedom of human rights, the source of humanity and the mother of truth. To strangle freedom of speech is to trample on the human rights, to stifle the humanity, and to suppress the truth that every person is entitled to hear. That is why we're gathered here tonight. This is the beginning of a new year, the year of the tiger. Tigers are brave and they are strong. In standing against tyrants, we'll need the characteristics of a tiger. The English poet William Blake began a famous poem with the words, "Tiger, tiger, burning bright." With the Olympic flame, we must burn bright with courage, with indignation, and with fearlessness. And we must stand in solidarity with the people of China against the CCP, which it suppresses and brutalizes, and we must carry on doing that for as long as it takes. Thank you for inviting me.
Freedom now! Freedom now! Freedom now! Freedom now!
Freedom now! Freedom now!
I would now like to invite our next speaker, Conservative MP Nusrat Ghani, who has championed human rights for the people of East Turkestan, Tibet, Hong Kong and China, and also has been sanctioned for standing up for truth and on the right side of history. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, everybody. I want to hear you roar as loud as you can so the Chinese Communist Party know that we're here tonight. Let me hear you roar. Yeah! Let me hear you say no to the Genocide Olympic Games. No to the Genocide Olympic Games. I'm really pleased to be with you here today. I was in Parliament just earlier on, working with my colleagues across both houses, the Houses of Parliament and the House of Lords, to expose the atrocities of the Chinese Communist Party. Tomorrow we have the Beijing Winter Olympics. China will do its very best to paint the prettiest picture or what's happening at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. But we know the truth. We want the world to see the crackdown against Hong Kong. We want the world to see the persecution against the Tibetans. And we want to see the ongoing real-time genocide of the Uyghur people. No to the Genocide Olympics! No to the Genocide Olympics! The Chinese Communist Party is engaging in the most expensive PR campaign. But let me tell you this, we will not let China off the hook. Yes. We will not forget Hong Kong. We will not forget Tibet. And we will never forget or forgive the ongoing genocide against the Uyghur people. So while of course I'll be cheering on the great Team GB, I will also be very vocal in putting shame on China. And if China thinks they've got away with this, they're already covered in shame. No diplomatic presence from international countries. I am so pleased that the United Kingdom will not be having a diplomatic presence at these genocide Olympic Games. No one can deny what is happening against the Uyghur people. The crime of all crimes, genocide. The evidence collected by the Uyghur Tribunal here in London makes it clear for any company, any CEO, any government, that if it is complicit of the Uyghur genocide, it will be called out, they will be blacklisted, they will never be forgotten, they'll be written down in history as complicit in the Uyghur genocide. So let me be clear, any company that is involved in profiting from Uyghur slave labor will be blacklisted. They can never come forward and say, we did not know. We know what is going on. No to the genocide games. No to the genocide games. I want to also remind everybody of the B&O that Lord Alton spoke about earlier. It's very important that we keep that process open. It's also very important that we continue to welcome Hong Kongers to this amazing country. To all Hong Kongers, you are welcome here. Next month, in March, I share an anniversary with Lord Alton and a few parliamentarians where we will have served 1 year as sanctioned parliamentarians here in the UK. The sanctions were to intimidate us. The sanctions were to silence us. The sanctions were to isolate us. But unfortunately, or fortunately, the Chinese Communist Party failed. All the sanctions did was enable us to make sure our work progressed and progressed internationally. And let me put on record, I will always stand side by side by the Uyghur women. No to the genocide games. No to the genocide games. So as these Olympics begin, let's remind everybody what's exactly happening in China at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. And let me remind everybody here, the UK Parliament has unanimously accepted the motion of genocide. 650 MPs are standing by all of you here today. We accept that a genocide is taking place. And let me remind the crowd and the Chinese Communist Party, we, the British public, we, the British parliamentarians, we will not be cowards, we will not be intimidated, and we will speak truth to power. No to the genocide games. No to the genocide games. Thank you. No to the genocide games. No to the genocide games. No to the genocide games. Shame on China. Shame on China. Shame on the IOC. Shame on the IOC. Shame on the IOC. Shame on the IOC. Down, down, CCP. Down, down, CCP. Down, down, CCP. Down, down, CCP. Free East Turkestan. Free East Turkestan. Free East Turkestan. Free Tibet. Free Tibet. Free Tibet. Tibet belongs to. Tibet belongs to. Stop the genocide in Tigray. Stop the genocide in Tigray. Stop the genocide in Tigray.
Shame on China!
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 Shame on the IOC!
Shame on IOC!
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 What do we want?
Freedom!
What do we want?
Freedom!
When do we want it?
Now!
When?
Now!
When?
Now!
China, China, China!
Out, out, out!
China, China, China!
Out, out, out!
China lie!
People die!
China lie!
People die!
China lie!
People die! China lie!
People die!
China lie!
People die!
China lie!
People die!
China, China, China! China, China, China! Down, down, Beijing Olympic! Down, down!
Beijing Olympics!
Down, down!
Beijing Olympics!
No more bloody games! No more!
Bloody day!
No more!
Bloody day!
Down, down!
CCP!
Down, down!
CCP!
No more!
Bloody day!
No more!
Bloody day!
No more!
Bloody day!
IOC! Shame, shame, shame! IOC! 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 Xi Jinping! Shame on you! Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide! Stop the torture! Stop the torture! Stop the torture! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Turkestan! Free Turkestan! Free Turkestan! Free Hong Kong! Free Hong Kong! Free Hong Kong! Free Hong Kong! Free Somalia! Free Somalia! Free Tibet! Free Hong Kong! Free Hong Kong! Free Turkestan! Free Turkestan! Down, down, CCP! Down, down! Down, down! No more bloody game! No more! No more! No more! No more! Xi Jinping! Shame on you! Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping!
Now we are going to have different representatives for different communities to speak. The first one will be from the Uyghur community, Nusrat Ghani. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here to stand against Chinese Communist Party's crimes on genocide games. According to the Olympics, the goal of the Olympics movement is to contribute to building a peaceful and better world by educating youth through sports practice without discriminations of any kind and in the Olympic spirit, which requires mutual understanding with a spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play. This means that they should deeply care about human rights laws and will do anything to prevent ongoing injustices, human rights abuses, and genocides. However, the Olympics is happening in a state where innocent people are tortured in concentration camps, women are raped and forcibly sterilized, children are taken far away from their families and put to orphanages where they are brainwashed. An event that is contributing to building a peaceful and better world is taking place in a state where human rights abuses are happening, where genocide is happening towards the Uyghurs. Like many Uyghurs abroad, I also have family members in East Turkestan, and it has been over 6 years I haven't heard from them. The Chinese government tells me that my family is living a happy, normal life. However, I have also been told by CCP that my cousin Emerjan and his family don't exist on their official records. I saw them, I held them, I have photos of them. The memories lives within me. The Chinese authorities have no right to tell me that they don't exist. This is my family, and together we can find my family and other Uyghur families who are missing today in East Turkestan. On behalf of the Uyghur community in the UK, I thank everyone who has been working so hard to convince the governments, including the UK, US, and Lithuania, to diplomatic boycott Beijing 2022. To conclude, I would like to ask you all to not watch Beijing 2022 Olympics, spread awareness about the cause, and write to your MPs to support organizations, campaigns, and activists who are working hard to get the governments to take serious political actions to stop the Uyghur genocide. Thank you.
Stop the Uyghur genocide!
Stop the Uyghur genocide!
Stop the Uyghur genocide!
Stop the Uyghur genocide!
Boycott Beijing 2022!
Boycott Beijing 2022!
Boycott Beijing 2022!
Boycott Beijing 2022!
Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free East Turkestan!
Free East Turkestan!
Free East Turkestan!
Free East Turkestan!
Free all innocent people!
Free all innocent people!
Thank you.
And now we are going to have the representative from Hong Kong Aid, Ken.
Hello, thank you for joining the protest. I'm glad to see you all here on this story road of struggle. We all here because of the human rights are being exploited to strengthen the power of CCP. And the country shouldn't be qualified to host an international sport event that aims to promote peace. By allowing China to host the event means allowing the murderous regime to spread the idea of human rights exploitation in the world. People often ask how much influence to drive us to stand up against the totalitarian CCP. But as a Hong Konger, we saw different cruel incidents in almost every generation under CCP's rule. The persecution of dissidents persecution of dissidents, and even the mass ethnic cleansing happened just to consolidate the power of CCP. We have not only witnessed how CCP sacrificed human lives for the evil regime, but from time to time after the handover of Hong Kong to China, we have witnessed the totalitarian government suppressing the value of democracy, causing death of Hong Kong. We all can choose to start a new life in a democracy and free country. But it is because we have seen through the tactics of CCP. We understood what happened to Tibet and Uyghur yesterday. It is happening in Hong Kong today and will be spread worldwide tomorrow. If we don't stop it now, so perhaps many of you will feel it is a fertile because human rights in Xinjiang had become an international issue. But still, the 2022 Winter Olympics is still ongoing under the international focus. It is so ridiculous, but also this is a reflection of the CCP long arm had rendered many countries. But as an individual, we can always take action in different areas to fight against the CCP, the evil regime, such as stop watching and involved in the 2022 Winter Olympics. It is because I believe that every one of you has the power to make a difference and move the world towards a better future. Thank you.
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Stand with Hong Kong!
Stand by Hong Kong!
Stand with Hong Kong!
Stand with Hong Kong!
Stand with Hong Kong!
Stand with Hong Kong! Thank you.
And now we are going to have the third representative, which that is the Tibetan representative, Tsering Passang.
Good evening. Thank you very much for amazing speakers from the Parliament as well as from various communities who are all being persecuted one way or another by the Chinese regime. This year's 2022 Olympic Games should not be held in today's China, today's repressive China, where gross violation of human rights is taking place on a daily basis. And certainly, the Olympics should not have been awarded to a regime which persecutes its own people, including the peaceful Falun Gong practitioners, as well as those in China's occupied Tibet and East Turkestan. The communist regime is using this international sporting event for its own political gains, both within China and around the world. This international sporting event should only be held in a place or a country where people enjoy equality, where universal human rights is respected, where human dignity is preserved, and where people can freely exercise their freedom of speech without any fear. Hosting the Olympics is an honor for our country to welcome people from around the world to share each other's culture, experience, and friendship. Only 14 years ago, China secured the best gift ever to host the Beijing 2008 Summer Olympic Games from the International Olympics Committee, IOC. In order to secure the 2008 Beijing Olympics, China made so many promises to the international community. Unsurprisingly, those promises were all broken, and yet, the IOC and its chiefs continued rewarding the CCP regime with another Winter Olympics in 2022. So, why
Why are the IOC and its chiefs pandering to the Chinese regime? The question does raise whether the IOC and its chiefs are getting in complicity with the communist Chinese regime in committing crimes against humanity, including genocide of the Uyghur people. For the persecuted communities, whether we are Tibetans or Uyghurs, we recognize this year's Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic as the genocide games of the 21st century. In Tibet today, there are increased crackdowns on the peaceful Tibetans. Just recently, London-based Free Tibet and Tibet Watch reported that Tibetan Buddhist learning centers, including monasteries and nunneries in Tibet, are being demolished by the Chinese authorities. Monks and nuns are kicked out from the Buddhist cultural learning centers. Buddhist statues are forcibly being demolished under the direct Buddhist statues are forcibly being demolished under the direct command of China's dictator Xi Jinping. Friends, if this is not a cultural genocide, then what is it? In 2008, Dundu Wangchen was arrested and imprisoned by the Chinese authorities for simply making a documentary film called Leaving Fear Behind. He served over 6 years in Chinese prisons, followed by several more years of house arrest, until he fled the country and escaped into exile in late 2017. All Dundu Wangchen did for his documentary film was to seek the views of Tibetans in China's occupied Tibet about their love for the exiled Tibetan spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and what the 2008 Beijing Olympics meant for them. Asking those questions proved to be certainly a sensitive topic for the Chinese regime, for which Dundu Wangchen caused over 6 years in Chinese jail. In his own words, Dundu Wangchen says, the promises made by China for the 2008 Olympics have all been broken and have taken many innocent lives. People had to go through all sorts of hardships. It is our responsibility to make sure that such mistakes are not repeated. So friends, it is encouraging to see that some 15 countries, including the United Kingdom, and just today, India, which has a population of 1.3 billion, have declared a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics. We sincerely thank all these countries for standing up for universal human rights of China's persecuted communities by sending a very strong message to the Chinese leaders in Beijing. We also thank you, our friends and supporters around the world, for your continued support. For us, it means a lot. Leaders in democratic countries can do more by pressing on the Chinese regime to respect universal human rights and freedom of speech. Mao Zedong once said, where there is oppression, there will be resistance. Yes, we, the persecuted communities under the CCP regime, have one simple message to the communist leaders in Beijing. We are here to resist. We are here to resist. To resist China's illegal occupation of our countries. To resist the CCP regime's continued gross violations of human rights in Tibet, East Turkestan, and Hong Kong. Finally, I would like to call for the freedom, justice, equality, human rights for all the persecuted communities in China and its occupied territories, including in Tibet, East Turkestan, Hong Kong, Southern Mongolia, and of course our friends Tigrayan community in Ethiopia. Thank you very much. Thank you. Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Turkestan! Free Turkestan! Free Turkestan! Free Hong Kong! Free Hong Kong! Free Hong Kong!
Free Tibet! And now we are going to have the support from the Jewish community. That is Olaf Stendal.
Shalom, my friends. Friends, my name is Olaf Stendal. I'm here on behalf of the Never Again Right Now campaign and the European Union of Jewish Students to say it loud and clear. China's genocide games are an international disgrace. We're gathered here because even though China is at war with human rights, we will not back down. These genocide games happening right now are turning all of the companies, the governments, the visiting elites into atrocity deniers right before our eyes. So the Chinese embassy, the broadcasters, the companies, Coca-Cola right there, all of you are complicit. Now the IOC like to insist that the games are strictly apolitical. They run away from scrutiny when they're presented with plain, undeniable facts. But, no matter how much they run, China's unspeakable human rights violations are in plain sight. Against the Uyghurs, against the Tibetans, against Hong Kongers, against Mongolians, against the Kazakhs, and against our friends, the Tigrayans. And friends, human rights violations against one is a crime against all of us. So let us never forget, these games are never apolitical. Before the 1936 Berlin Games, Jesse Owens, the heroic African-American Olympian, he spoke out against the persecution of minorities by Hitler. And he was still facing a torrent of abuse and racism in the US. He went on to win 4 gold medals, proving to Hitler that his Aryan supremacy theory was nonsense. When the 2008 Olympics took place in China, only 14 years ago, they said human rights will be improved by the next Olympics, didn't they? We already knew back then in 2008 about the mass persecution of Tibetans, for example, but the international community just stood silent. They just took China at face value. And yet, friends, here we go again. The Olympics are taking place starting tomorrow, while minorities are being systematically persecuted by brutal dictatorship of Xi Jinping. Shame, shame on Xi Jinping! 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 And friends, that's why we're here. That's why we're loud, and that's why we'll keep fighting for justice. Beijing is hard at work pressuring foreigners like us to shut up about human rights. When it comes to Olympic athletes, it even includes threats. Citizen Lab, the NGO, has recently revealed that all the Olympic athletes are forced to download this app, and the app puts their data and conversations at risk. It actually allows users to report politically sensitive content. There's a censorship list on that app. So any athlete, any coach, any journalist in Beijing who dares to mention the ongoing genocide of the Uyghurs or other human rights violations, they would find themselves in trouble. And the IOC's response, well, they came to Beijing's defense. When Pink Shuai is missing, they came to Beijing's defense. They excused China's violations time and time again, and we say enough is enough. So let's say it loud and clear today. Let's say it loud and clear today. IOC, shame on you! IOC, shame on you! IOC, shame on you!
Shame on you! IOC,
shame on you! Right. So as athletes parade on the shiny new stadiums, let's spare a thought for the slave workers languishing in camps who may have made their uniforms. While spectators wave their Olympic souvenirs, let's spare a thought for those who have been ripped apart from their families. Last week, we remembered the atrocities of the Holocaust. And just like every year, we said never again. Never again to genocide, never again to dehumanization, never again to what might seem like history, but is happening at present. So to those who are allowing history to repeat today, Coca-Cola, we're watching you. IOC, Samsung, we're watching you. To those who are allowing history to repeat itself, shame on them! Shame on them! Shame on them!
Shame on them! Shame on them!
These games are not just a sporting event, but they're a powerful tool for Chinese state propaganda. You know, during the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin, the Nazis already operated camps. People knew what was going on. People knew that Jews were being killed on the streets for the name of a dangerous ideology. And as a young Jew, growing up in Europe, I ask myself this every single year. Why is it that the world stood silent? Why did the global community leave it so late to act? Why were they in denial? And as the 2022 Beijing Games are about to begin, we all know that China operates camps and tramples over human rights. This is not fabrication. This is fact. But the sheen of the Olympics will allow them to whitewash it. So the question is, friends, whose side are we on? Will we stay resilient in our fight to defend human rights for all? Or are we going to be cowed into silence by China? Because to do nothing is to have blood on our hands. If we do nothing, the future will never forgive us. Friends, we, every single one of you, are what courage looks like. We are what solidarity looks like. And we will never give up until China's brutal oppression comes to an end. Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Freedom, freedom for the Uyghurs!
Freedom, freedom for the Uyghurs!
Free East Turkestan!
Free East Turkestan!
CCP, shame on you!
CCP, shame on you!
IOC, shame on you!
IOC, shame on you!
No to the genocide games!
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 Thank you.
Trust me, brother. Hey, brothers, listen to me. Peace and prosperity for everyone. Peace and prosperity for everyone. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that correct?
And now we are going to have the last representative, that is Tigray from Tigray.
Can I say one last thing? Fuck the CCP.
Thank you, everyone. On November 4, 2020, the Ethiopian government, in tandem with Eritrean forces, waged a genocidal war on the Tigrayan people. The Tigrayan people have faced coordinated attacks on their bodies, personal freedom, heritage, and land by the Ethiopian government and allied forces. The systemic violence seeks to dismantle the fabric of Tigrayan society, terrorize the population, and erase the history and contributions of Tigrayans in Ethiopia. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed waged a genocidal war on Tigray to strip us of our right to maintain our culture and language. The war on Tigray has had horrendous consequences. 6 million people are in urgent need of emergency food assistance. There is a man-made famine taking place, and hundreds have already died of hunger. 2.2 million people are internally displaced. More than 75% of domestic animals in Tigray have been killed so that farmers would not have oxen to plow with for years to come. The war on Tigray is aimed at destroying Tigray's cultural and religious heritage. The destruction of heritage and religious sites, educational institutions, factories and hospitals intends to rob us of our history and culture. Hate speech, demeaning analogies, and blatant threats for Tigrayan annihilation have all led to ethnic cleansing and extensive cultural genocide of Tigrayans throughout Ethiopia. The deliberate targeting and harassment of Tigrayans has been systemically implemented throughout the country. It's part of the Ethiopian government's ploy to subjugate Tigrayans. Farm tools have been destroyed or looted by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. There has been no access to farm inputs such as seeds and fertilizer. The intentional destruction of Tigray's economy, more specifically the agricultural sector, is proof of this deliberate attempt to starve Tigray. It's an orchestrated famine that's engulfing the region. We are here to boycott the Winter Games because of China's involvement in arming the federal government of Ethiopia to continue the genocidal war on Tigray. The Chinese government has consistently voted against UN Human Rights Council motion to set up a 3-member team to investigate abuses, has called this genocidal war an internal matter. The Chinese government also objected a statement by the UN Security Council calling for an end to the violence in Tigray and to spotlight the millions in need of humanitarian assistance. Tigray Youth Network and the Tigrayan community in the UK would like to take this opportunity to address Tigrayans and friends of Tigrayans in a bid to urge you to continue your efforts in fiercely advocating for an end to the genocidal war on Tigray. Please utilize all resources at your disposal. This isn't a time to decelerate our advocacy efforts. As a collective, we must continue to reach out to our local MPs, parliamentary groups and religious leaders to ensure we are exhausting all measures to speak about the war on Tigray. Stop Tigray genocide!
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 Stand up for Tigray!
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 Stop the man-made famine in Tigray!
Stop the man-made famine in Tigray!
Tigray is starving!
Tigray is starving!
Tigray is starving!
Tigray is starving!
Stop the man-made famine!
Stop the man-made famine!
Stop the man-made famine!
Stop the man-made famine!
UK act now for Tigray!
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 Silence is violence!
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 Stop the Tigray genocide!
Stop the Tigray genocide!
Stop the Tigray genocide!
Stop the Tigray genocide!
Free Tigray!
Free Tigray!
Free Tigray!
Free Tigray!
Free Tigray!
Free Tigray!
Thank you, everyone.
So this is the first time that we have an African community to join us. So we need to show some kind of support to Tigray. Free Tigray!
Free Tigray!
Free Tigray!
Free Tigray!
And now we are going to proceed to the medal ceremony.
Hello? 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 Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free East Turkestan! Stop Tigray genocide!
Stop Tigray genocide!
Defund Tigray genocide!
Defund Tigray genocide!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Uyghurs!
Free Uyghurs!
China, China, China! China, China, China! Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's medal ceremony. As you all know, China is preparing to host the 2022 Winter Games. The world's eyes will be on Beijing as top athletes compete. But we want to draw your attention to some of the Chinese Communist Party's other achievements, because it would be a shame if they were to slip under the radar. Without further ado, I present the man who will be handing out the medals, President of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach!
Shame on Thomas! Shame on Thomas! Shame on IOC! Shame on Shame on the IOC!
Shame on the IOC!
Shame on the IOC!
Shame on the IOC!
Fire Thomas Bach!
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 Thomas Bach must resign!
Thomas Bach must resign!
Thomas Bach must resign!
Thomas Bach must resign!
And so, to the awards. The first award is for the most people detained in concentration camps since World War II. And the winner is President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping. There he is, accepting his medal after imprisoning at least 2 million Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims. The next award is for creating the least free place on earth. And oh look, it's Xi Jinping again! Another gold medal, and doesn't he look proud? Under his rule, Freedom House has ranked Tibet the least free place on earth, tied with Syria. The medal for fastest destruction of a democracy is next. A hotly contested one, this. But it's Xi Jinping again.
Oh my God!
In recognition of his national security law, which has criminalized even the tiniest acts of dissent in Hong Kong. The final medal this evening is in a new category, supporting the genocide in Tigray. The Ethiopian government's war on Tigray has killed over 150,000. But who is one of this war's biggest international backers? Oh, it's Xi Jinping again.
Shame on Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping! Shame on Xi Jinping! Shame on Xi Jinping! Shame on Xi Jinping! Shame on Xi Jinping!
Wow, this truly is a record-breaking day for him. But what is that sound? Some people sound displeased. Perhaps the decision to award the Winter Games to Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party was not so popular after all. A huge error of judgment by the IOC, one that will go down in history. We will remember this fateful decision, but also those who resisted it, those who protested, who boycotted, and who stood against the genocide games.
Down, down, Xi Jinping!
Down, down, Xi Jinping!
Down, down, Xi Jinping! Down, down, Xi Jinping! Down, down, Xi Jinping! Down, down, Xi Jinping!
China, China, China! China, China, China!
Shame! China shame! 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 China shame! 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 China shame! Down! Down! China down! 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 CCP! Down! Down! CCP! Shame! Down! CCP! Shame! Down! CCP! Stop the bloody games! 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 Stop the genocide games! Stop the genocide games! Stop the genocide games! Stop the genocide games! Speak up for the truth! 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 IOC! Shame on you! 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 Stop the bloody gas! Stop the bloody gas! Stop the bloody gas! Stop the bloody gas! Stop the genocide gas! Stop the genocide gas! Stop the genocide gas! Stop the genocide gas! Shame on CCP! Shame on CCP! Shame on CCP! Shame on CCP! Stop the bloody gas! Stop the bloody gas! Stop the bloody
die.
China lies.
People die.
Stop the bloody gas.
Stop the bloody gas.
Stop the bloody gas.
Stop the bloody gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
Boycott, boycott.
Boycott.
Boycott, boycott.
Beijing Olympics.
Boycott, boycott.
Beijing Olympics.
Boycott, boycott.
Beijing Olympics.
Boycott, boycott.
Beijing Olympics.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Hong Kong.
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 Free Turkestan.
Free Turkestan.
Free Turkestan.
Free Turkestan.
Free Tigray.
Free Tigray.
Free Tigray.
Free Tigray.
Free Tigray.
Free Tigray.
Shame on
CCP.
Shame on
CCP.
Shame on
CCP.
Stop the bloody gas.
Stop the bloody gas.
Stop the bloody gas.
Stop the bloody gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
IOC.
Shame on you.
IOC.
Shame on you.
IOC.
Shame on you.
IOC.
Shame on you.
Shame, shame.
CCP.
Shame, shame.
CCP.
Shame, shame.
CCP.
Xi Jinping.
Shame on you.
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 Stop the genocide gas.
Stop the genocide gas.
Stop the genocide gas.